The house stood at the end of the narrow street, quiet and still as if it had been holding its breath for years. Its paint had peeled in long strips, and the wooden steps sagged under their own weight. The windows were cloudy, hiding whatever memories were trapped inside. It was not a welcoming place, but it was the only place left. Elena Moore parked her car and did not move right away. She sat with both hands on the steering wheel, staring at the front door. Her reflection in the glass showed a woman in her mid-30s with tired eyes and a face that had learned how to hide disappointment. She felt empty in a way that sleep never fixed. Getting out of the car felt harder than it should have. Elena finally opened the door and stepped onto the street. The air smelled like damp earth and old leaves. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked, then went quiet again. She picked up her bag and walked toward the house, her steps slow and unsure. This was not how her life was supposed to look. Once she had plans. They had been clear and bright. A marriage that would last. A child's laughter filling a home. Simple dreams, nothing special. But those dreams had faded one by one, leaving behind questions she never found answers to. The marriage ended quietly. No shouting. No clear villain. Just two people who grew tired and stopped trying at the same time. When it was over, Elena told herself she was fine. She said it so often that others believed her. She almost believed it too. The harder wound was the one she never talked about. The doctor's office. The careful words. The way hope was not taken away but pushed far enough that it hurt to reach for it. Since then, the thought of becoming a mother felt like standing in front of a locked door without a key. She unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The house smelled like dust and time. The floor creaked under her feet, loud in the silence. Sunlight slipped through thin curtains, lighting up floating dust in the air. Everything felt frozen, like the house had been paused and was now waiting to be started again. Elena set her bag down and looked around. The living room was bare except for an old couch and a small table. A clock hung crooked on the wall, its hands stopped. She felt a strange pressure in her chest, as if the walls were holding memories too heavy to share. This house had belonged to her aunt, a woman who kept secrets and asked few questions. When she passed away, the house came to Elena, not as a gift but as a responsibility. Selling it would take time and money Elena didn't have. Staying felt easier even if it scared her. She told herself this was temporary. A place to hide. A place to breathe. Elena walked through the room slowly. The kitchen cabinets creaked when she opened them. The bedroom smelled faintly of old soap. In one corner, the wallpaper was torn, revealing cracks underneath. Every room felt like it had something to say but didn't know how. By the time evening came, exhaustion settled deep in her body. She unpacked only the basics. Clothes went into drawers without care. A framed photo stayed inside her bag. She wasn't ready to see it yet. Outside, the sky darkened and shadows filled the corners of the house. That night, Elena lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. The house made soft noises, wood shifting, pipes knocking, sounds that reminded her she was not alone, even though she felt like she was. Her thoughts drifted back to all the moments she wished she could redo. All the things she never said. All the choices she avoided because they scared her. Tears slipped down the sides of her face, silent and heavy. In the morning, she woke with a dull ache behind her eyes and a strange sense of determination. She couldn't fix her past. But maybe she could fix this house. It was a small goal. A safe one. Elena pulled on old clothes, tied her hair back and opened the windows. Dust filled the air as light poured in. She found tools in the shed out back, rusted, worn but usable. Holding a hammer felt strange at first, then steady. She started with the spare bedroom. The walls were damaged there, stained by old water leaks. It wasn't pretty work. Plaster cracked and fell at her feet. Her arms grew tired and sweat ran down her back, but she kept going. With every strike, something inside her loosened. This was something she could control. As the hammer hit the wall again and again, Elena had no idea she was getting closer to something hidden. Something meant for her. Something that had been waiting far longer than she had. She raised the hammer once more. And the wall answered back with a sound that did not belong. The sound stopped Elena mid-swing. It wasn't the dull crack of plaster or the hollow thud she had grown used to. This sound was sharper. Solid. Wrong. She lowered the hammer slowly, her heart beating faster than it should have. For a moment, she stood completely still, listening. The house was quiet again, but the silence felt tighter now, like it had noticed her attention. Elena leaned closer to the wall. A thin crack had formed where the hammer struck, but behind it was something darker than empty space. She brushed loose plaster away with her fingers. Dust coated her skin, but she barely noticed. Her focus narrowed to the small opening in front of her. There was something inside. Her stomach twisted with a strange mix of fear and curiosity. "This is stupid," she muttered, though her voice sounded weak even to her own ears. She widened the gap carefully, pulling more plaster free until her fingers could slip inside. The space felt deliberate, like it had been made on purpose. Her fingertips brushed against something dry and smooth. Paper. Elena sucked in a sharp breath and pulled her hand back as if burned. She stared at the opening, her thoughts racing. Who would hide paper inside a wall? And why? After a few seconds, she reached in again, slower this time, and gently pulled the object out. It was a letter. Folded neatly. Yellowed around the edges but not brittle. It looked old but not ruined. Almost protected. Her heart pounded in her ears. She turned it over in her hands, brushing dust away. Then she saw the front. Her name. Written clearly in dark ink. Elena Moore. Her full name. Her knees weakened and she sank down onto the floor, her back against the wall. The room felt colder, even though sunlight still poured in through the window. She glanced around, half expecting someone to be standing there, watching her. No one was there. The house remained still. Her fingers trembled as she stared at the writing. She didn't recognize the handwriting. It wasn't her aunt's. It wasn't anyone she knew. A nervous laugh escaped her lips, short and breathless. "This can't be for me," she whispered. But her name didn't disappear. With shaking hands, Elena unfolded the letter. The first line made her chest tighten so hard it hurt. It said the letter was written by her child. Not a child she had once known. A child she would have. Elena felt the air leave her lungs. She stared at the words again, certain she had misunderstood them. Her vision blurred and she blinked hard, but the meaning stayed the same. Her child. Future. Words that did not belong together in her life. A rush of emotions hit her all at once. Fear, disbelief, anger, and something softer that scared her the most. Hope. She shook her head sharply. "No," she said out loud. "No, this isn't funny." Her hands tightened around the paper as if she could force it to make sense. This had to be a joke. A coincidence. Something left behind that happened to use her name. That happened to say the worst possible thing. But deep down, another feeling stirred. The letter didn't feel random. It felt personal. Elena pressed the paper to her chest, her heart racing as memories flooded her mind. Doctor visits. Quiet nights. Questions she never asked out loud because she was afraid of the answers. Tears welled in her eyes, uninvited and sudden. She wiped them away angrily and stood up, pacing the small room. The walls seemed closer now, like they were leaning in. The house creaked softly, settling around her. She looked back at the opening in the wall. Who put it there? And why hide it so carefully? Elena sat back down on the floor, her back against the wall again. Her breathing slowed, though her hands still shook. The letter felt warm, almost alive, like it had been waiting for this moment. She hadn't even read it yet. Fear told her to throw it away. To seal the wall back up and forget this ever happened. But another part of her, quiet, stubborn and aching, wanted to know more. She took a deep breath. Whatever this was, it had found her. And for reasons she didn't understand, she wasn't ready to walk away. She unfolded the letter fully and began to read. Elena's eyes moved slowly across the page. At first she only saw shapes, lines of ink, words that didn't feel real yet. Her hands were still shaking and she had to stop twice just to steady her breathing. The room was quiet, so quiet she could hear her own heartbeat. Then the meaning settled in. The letter did not speak like a stranger. It spoke like someone who had been watching her for a long time. Someone who knew the parts of her she kept hidden. It talked about her loneliness. Not the loud kind, but the quiet kind that followed her even in crowded rooms. The kind that showed up late at night, when she turned off the lights and stared at the ceiling, wondering how her life had become so small. Elena swallowed hard. The letter mentioned her fear of the future. How she pretended she didn't want certain things anymore because wanting them hurt too much. It spoke of her strength but also of how tired she was of being strong all the time. Tears slid down her face, one after another. "No one knows this," she whispered. But the letter went on. It spoke of her past marriage. Not the ending but the silence that came before it. The days when she felt unseen. The moments when she chose peace over honesty and paid for it later. It didn't judge her. It simply understood. Her chest ached as if something inside her was breaking open. The letter spoke of motherhood, not as a promise but as a question. It acknowledged her fear. The way hope felt dangerous now. The way every passing year felt like a quiet goodbye to a life she once imagined. Elena pressed a hand to her mouth as a soft sob escaped. Then the tone of the letter shifted. It became urgent. The words warned her that she was standing near a choice. A moment that would seem small at first, easy to ignore. A call she might avoid. A truth she might refuse to hear. The letter did not say exactly what would happen, only that silence would cost her more than she realized. There was love in the warning. Not loud love. Gentle love. The kind that asks instead of demands. The child wrote with sadness, as if they already knew how much pain waited on the other side of that choice. But there was hope there too, fragile but real. Elena lowered the letter and stared at the floor. "This is impossible," she said, though her voice sounded unsure. Her mind fought back hard. This had to be coincidence. Someone could have guessed these things. People feel lonely. People get divorced. People fear the future. The letter was vague enough to fit anyone. She read it again, slower this time. Her heart skipped when she reached a detail she couldn't explain. The letter mentioned a small habit she had never shared with anyone. Something she did when she was anxious. A way she counted her breaths without realizing it. A memory tied to her childhood that still shaped her fears. Elena's hands went cold. She hadn't even admitted that to herself. Her phone buzzed suddenly in her pocket. She flinched and nearly dropped the letter. The sound echoed loudly in the quiet room. Her heart pounded as she pulled the phone out with trembling fingers. A missed call. Her breath caught. The name wasn't saved, but she knew it instantly. It was someone from her past. Someone she had been avoiding for weeks. Someone the letter had warned her about without saying their name. Her pulse raced as she stared at the screen. The timing was too perfect. Too cruel. Elena looked back at the letter, her mind spinning. This couldn't be real. And yet, it felt real. The house creaked softly, like it was settling deeper around her. Sunlight shifted across the floor, marking the slow passing of time. Everything felt normal and completely wrong at the same time. She sat there for a long while, the letter in one hand and the phone in the other. Her heart told her to run. To pretend none of this had happened. But another feeling pushed back. If the letter was wrong, then reading it meant nothing. But if it was right? Elena's throat tightened. She didn't know what scared her more, the idea that the letter was impossible or the idea that it might be true. She folded the paper carefully and held it close, as if it might disappear if she didn't. Outside, a car passed by. Somewhere, a door slammed. Life went on. But inside the old house, something had shifted. And Elena knew deep down that whatever came next, she would never be able to forget the words she had just read. That night, Elena did not sleep. She lay on the narrow bed, staring into the dark, the letter folded neatly on the nightstand beside her. She told herself she wouldn't touch it again. She told herself she wouldn't think about it. Neither promise lasted. Her mind searched for reasons. Logical ones. Someone could have hidden the letter years ago. Maybe it was a cruel joke left behind by a stranger. Maybe grief and exhaustion were playing tricks on her thoughts. She clung to those ideas because they felt safer than the truth. By morning, her head throbbed from lack of sleep. Sunlight slipped through the curtains, soft and ordinary, as if nothing strange had happened. Elena took a deep breath and stood up, determined to prove to herself that life was still normal. She made coffee. The bitter smell filled the kitchen. She sipped it slowly, grounding herself in small routines. This was real. This was solid. A letter couldn't change that. But as she turned toward the sink, her eyes caught on something that made her pause. The kitchen clock. It had stopped months ago, its hands frozen in place. She hadn't bothered fixing it. Yet now it was ticking softly, the second hand moving again. Elena stared at it. Her chest tightened. "That's nothing," she whispered. "Just coincidence." Still, unease followed her through the day. She tried calling a friend but hung up before it rang. How could she explain this without sounding unstable? She imagined the pity in their voice, the quiet worry. The thought made her stomach twist. So she stayed silent. As the hours passed, she noticed small things. Too many small things. A song on the radio that reminded her of the past the letter hinted at. A stranger's words that echoed advice she had read only hours before. Each moment alone meant nothing. Together they felt like a pattern. Elena began to move differently. She checked her phone more often. She avoided the spare bedroom where she found the letter. She flinched at every unexpected sound the house made. At the same time, she felt pulled toward the nightstand, toward the folded paper waiting there. Fear and curiosity fought inside her. If the letter was real, then maybe her life wasn't broken beyond repair. Maybe there was still something waiting for her. But the letter also carried warning, and warnings came with consequences. Pain always followed truth. She picked up the letter again in the late afternoon, her fingers tracing the creases. It didn't feel threatening. It felt careful. Loving even. that frightened her most of all. Elena sat on the edge of the bed, pressing the letter against her chest. She thought about the missed call, about the name that had appeared on her screen, about how easy it would be to ignore it and let time decide for her. She had lived that way before, and she had paid for it. Tears filled her eyes, slow and heavy. She wasn't ready to believe in miracles, but she was tired of pretending she didn't care anymore. If the letter was wrong, she would lose nothing by listening. If it was right, Elena exhaled shakily. She reached for her phone and unlocked it. Her thumb hovered over the call log, trembling. "I won't ignore you," she whispered, not sure if she meant the letter, the child, or herself. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, brushing softly against the house. Inside, Elena made a quiet decision. She would not throw the letter away. She would not pretend it didn't exist. Whatever this was, fear, hope, or something impossible, it had found her for a reason. And she was finally ready to face it. The second letter came 3 days later. Elena hadn't been looking for it. In fact, she had tried to stay busy so she wouldn't think about letters at all. She cleaned the kitchen cabinets, sorted through old boxes in the hallway, and fixed a loose board on the porch. She told herself that movement meant control. But control was slipping through her fingers. She found the second letter in the most ordinary way, while sweeping the floor of the hallway outside the spare bedroom. Dust and small bits of plaster gathered at her feet. When she pushed the broom against the wall, one section sounded hollow again. Her breath caught. "No," she whispered. "Not again." Her hands trembled as she knelt down. The crack in the wall was smaller this time, almost hidden, as if the house had tried to keep it secret. She brushed away the dust and reached inside. Her fingers closed around paper. This letter felt different the moment she touched it. It was heavier, thicker. The paper was slightly darker, as if time had pressed down on it harder. When she unfolded it, her chest tightened before she even began to read. This letter carried sorrow. It spoke with the same voice as the first, gentle, loving, but now there was regret woven into every line. The child wrote as if they were afraid. Afraid of what would happen if Elena did not listen. The letter warned her of a future shaped by silence and distance. It hinted at a loss that would not come suddenly but slowly, through pride, fear, and words left unspoken. A relationship that could still be saved, but only if she was brave enough to face the past. One name appeared in her thoughts immediately. Daniel. Her former husband. Elena's stomach twisted as memories flooded back. The way they stopped talking about important things. The arguments they avoided. The last night they spent together, sitting on opposite sides of the room, pretending they were fine. The letter did not blame her. That somehow made it worse. It spoke of forgiveness, not just forgiving others but forgiving herself. It warned that holding on to old anger would close doors she didn't even know were still open. It hinted that if she chose distance again, the future child would pay the price. Elena pressed a hand to her chest, her breathing shallow. "I don't know how," she whispered. Her phone buzzed on the counter behind her. She flinched, heart racing, then stood slowly and walked toward it. A message. From Daniel. He said he had been trying to reach her. He said there was something important he needed to tell her. He asked if they could talk, really talk, just once. The room seemed to tilt. Elena looked back at the letter in her hand. Tears blurred her vision. The timing was too exact. Too painful. The past she had buried was standing at her door again. For years she had told herself she was done. That some things could not be fixed. That moving on meant never looking back. But the letter told a different story. It told her that running away did not end pain. It only delayed it. Elena sank down onto a chair, clutching the letter as sobs finally broke free. She cried for the woman she used to be. For the love she lost. For the child she might never meet if she kept choosing fear. When the tears slowed, she wiped her face and took a deep breath. The truth settled heavily in her chest. Her unresolved past was not behind her. It was waiting. And if she did nothing, it would shape her future in ways she could not undo. Elena looked at her phone again, her hands steady now, even as her heart ached. "I can't ignore this," she whispered. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to imagine that change, real change, might still be possible. And that the cost of doing nothing was far greater than the pain of trying. Elena agreed to meet Daniel 2 days later. The time between felt stretched and heavy, like the air before a storm. She replayed old memories without meaning to, laughing in their first apartment, late-night talks, the slow shift from closeness to distance. Each memory carried warmth and regret in equal measure. The cafe was small and quiet, tucked between closed shops. Elena arrived early and chose a seat near the window. her hands wrapped tightly around a cup of tea she did not drink. Every time the door opened, her heart jumped. When Daniel finally walked in, she barely recognized him at first. He looked older, tired in the same way she felt tired. When their eyes met, something unspoken passed between them, familiar, painful, real. They spoke carefully at first, like strangers testing fragile ground. Then the walls came down. Daniel told her things he never said before. About feeling like he was failing. About how he thought silence was kinder than conflict. About how he regretted not fighting harder for them. Elena listened, tears burning behind her eyes. When it was her turn, the words came out in pieces. She spoke of fear. Of feeling invisible. Of choosing quiet over honesty because she didn't want to lose him, only to lose him anyway. The guilt hit her hard. She had told herself she was only a victim of timing and bad luck. But now she saw her part clearly. She had pulled away too. She had hidden behind strength instead of asking for help. The realization hurt. By the time they left the cafe, both of them looked drained. Nothing was fixed. No promises were made. But something had shifted. The truth had finally been spoken. That night, Elena returned to the house feeling hollow. She sat on the floor of the spare bedroom, the letters spread out in front of her. Shame wrapped around her chest as she read them again. She saw herself now, not as broken but as human. Flawed. Afraid. Capable of hurting others without meaning to. "I don't know if it's enough," she whispered. The house remained quiet. Days passed. Elena tried to move forward, but doubt followed her. What if it was too late? What if the damage had already been done? The letters offered no easy answers. They only asked her to keep going. One evening, exhaustion pulled her down hard. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, feeling the weight of failure settle in. The urge to give up pressed close. To accept that some mistakes couldn't be undone. That some futures were already lost. A sob broke free. "I tried," she said softly. "I really tried." For a long moment she considered stopping. Letting things return to silence. Letting life move forward without hope or expectation. Then she remembered the love in the letters. Not pressure. Not demands. Just belief. Elena wiped her face and stood up, her legs shaking. She didn't feel strong. She didn't feel brave. But she felt honest. "I'll keep going," she whispered. "Even if I'm scared." It wasn't a promise of success. It was a promise of effort. And for the first time in years, that felt like enough to take the next step. Change did not arrive all at once. It came in small, painful steps that forced Elena to face herself every day. She stopped avoiding difficult conversations. She returned phone calls she once ignored. She allowed herself to say what she felt, even when her voice shook. It was exhausting. Some days it felt easier to go back to silence. To the safety of not hoping. But the letters had taken that comfort away. They had shown her what was at stake. Elena met Daniel again. This time the conversation was harder. They talked about the future, not just the past. About what they wanted now, not who they used to be. There were moments of tension, moments when old wounds reopened and words landed wrong. More than once, Elena went home in tears. Not everything improved. Some efforts backfired. Some truths hurt more than she expected. Daniel wasn't sure what he wanted yet. Neither was she. Hope felt fragile like glass. The letters became less frequent. Days passed without anything new appearing. Elena checked the walls without meaning to. She listened for hollow sounds. Each silence tightened the knot in her chest. What if time was running out? Fear crept in again, sharper this time. What if she had misunderstood everything? What if she had already failed the future she was trying to protect? Still she kept going. She apologized where she once defended herself. She admitted fear instead of hiding it behind strength. She allowed herself to want things again. Love, family, connection, even though wanting hurt. One evening, Daniel asked her a question she had been avoiding. Could they truly start over, knowing everything they now knew? The weight of it pressed down on her chest. This was not a safe choice. It meant risk. It meant opening herself to loss again. But it also meant possibility. Elena went home that night and sat alone in the living room. The house felt different now. Less distant. Warmer somehow. Like it was watching her, not with judgment, but with patience. She thought about the letters. About the child's quiet hope. About the woman she was becoming. If she stepped back now, fear would decide her future for her. If she stepped forward, she would have to accept whatever came. Her hands trembled as she picked up her phone. This choice could change everything. Elena took a deep breath and made it. She chose honesty over safety. Love over fear. Whatever waited ahead, she would face it fully, knowing that fate was no longer something happening to her, but something she was shaping with every brave, painful step. The call came on a quiet afternoon, when Elena least expected it. She was in the kitchen, rinsing dust from her hands, sunlight warming the counter beside her. For a brief moment, everything felt almost normal. Peaceful even. She had learned not to trust moments like that, but she let herself enjoy it anyway. Her phone rang. She answered without thinking. The voice on the other end was careful. Too careful. By the time the call ended, Elena was sitting on the floor, her back against the cabinet, the phone resting loosely in her hand. The world felt distant, as if she were underwater. The news was not dramatic. No sudden tragedy. Just a quiet truth that settled deep and heavy in her chest. The future she had been hoping for might not be possible. Again. The details blurred together, but the meaning was clear. Whatever fragile chance she believed she had been protecting, it was slipping away. Not completely gone, but far enough that hope felt dangerous again. When the line went silent, Elena stayed where she was. Minutes passed. Maybe longer. She waited for the familiar comfort. For the sense that the letters were watching, guiding, promising that this pain meant something. But the house remained still. No creaks. No signs. No hidden messages. Days passed. No new letters appeared. Elena checked the walls anyway. Not with hope but habit. She ran her hands along the cracks she had opened, listening for hollow sounds that never came. The silence hurt more than any warning ever had. She believed she had failed. Failed herself. Failed the child who trusted her to be brave. Failed the future she dared to imagine. The weight of it pressed down until even breathing felt like work. One night, she sat alone in the spare bedroom, surrounded by unfinished repairs. The air felt thick and close. She folded the letters she already had and placed them back into the space where she found them. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I tried." Tears came quietly this time. No sobbing. Just a steady release, like something finally giving way. She did not fight it. She let the grief take its time. When the tears stopped, Elena felt empty, but calm. She realized something then. She could not control outcomes. She could only control how she lived. Whether she stayed honest. Whether she chose love even when it hurt. Hope had brought her pain. But it had also brought truth. The next morning, Elena woke up and opened the windows wide. She finished repairing the wall, not to hide the letters but to honor the work she had started. She cleaned the house slowly, gently, as if caring for something living. She stopped waiting for signs. She stopped listening for voices. She chose to live honestly even if the future stayed silent. And in that quiet surrender, Elena found a strength she didn't know she had. One that did not depend on promises, but on who she had become. It was a rainy afternoon when Elena discovered the truth. The house smelled of wet wood and dust. She had been sorting through old boxes in the attic, hoping to distract herself from the weeks of silence since the last letter. Her hands brushed against a stack of her aunt's journals, bound in leather, their edges curled with age. She had never opened them before. Now, on impulse, she did. The journals were full of careful observations. Dates, thoughts, notes about family, and most strangely, hints about the house itself. One passage caught her eye, a section describing hidden compartments, small places carved into the walls, meant to preserve letters and memories for the right person to find. Her aunt had written about leaving letters for future generations, messages meant to guide, console, and challenge the people she cared about. Elena's breath hitched. She realized then that the letters had been carefully hidden, preserved not by magic, but by her aunt's foresight and understanding. They were designed to arrive at a moment when Elena was ready, when she would need them most. The letters were real, yes, but not from the impossible future she had imagined. They were the work of someone who had loved her enough to anticipate her struggles, to nudge her gently toward courage and reflection. Yet even knowing this, their impact was undeniable. The letters had reached the deepest parts of her heart. They had forced her to confront her fears, her regrets, and her avoidance of pain. They had shown her the power of choice, of taking responsibility for her own future rather than waiting for life to happen to her. Elena sat on the floor of the attic, the journals spread out around her, the rain tapping softly against the roof. She felt a bittersweet clarity settle in her chest. Her child, whether real yet or still a possibility, depended not on fate alone, but on her willingness to grow, to act, to forgive, and to embrace love even when it was frightening. The letters had been a mirror, reflecting who she could become if she chose the harder path. And in that reflection she saw herself, not broken, not lost, but capable. Capable of change. Capable of love. Capable of becoming the mother she hoped to be someday, whether that child existed in the present or waited for her in the future. The attic grew quiet except for the rain. Elena traced the words in the journals with her fingers and closed them slowly. She felt a sense of peace she had never allowed herself before. The letters had not answered everything. They had not promised outcomes. They had only shown her the truth she had avoided, that love, courage, and hope were born in choice, not in certainty. Elena stood, brushing off her hands, and looked out the rain-streaked window. The world was the same. Yet she felt different, stronger, lighter, alive in a way she had not been for years. For the first time, the silence of the house no longer felt like emptiness. It felt like space, space for her own life, her own love, and her own future. And somewhere deep in her chest, a quiet sense of connection remained, an understanding that the letters had been more than paper and ink. They had been a bridge guiding her toward herself. Elena smiled softly, letting the rain wash over the weight of the past. She did not know exactly what the future held, but she knew she could meet it with an open heart. And that was enough. The house had changed. Not magically, not instantly, but slowly, quietly, just like Elena had. Rooms that once felt cold and lifeless now held warmth. Sunlight spilled into the living room, illuminating furniture she had repaired with care, a small rug she had picked out herself, and the scent of fresh bread she baked one Sunday morning, filling the air like hope. It was no longer just a place to hide. It was home. Elena herself had changed more than the house. The heavy weight of grief, fear, and regret had not disappeared, but it no longer controlled her. She laughed more freely, without the edge of anxiety lurking beneath. She allowed herself to care deeply for friends and family again, reaching out where she would once have retreated. She had begun seeing Daniel again, but differently this time. Not with clinging hope, not with desperate fear, but with honesty. They didn't erase the past, they honored it. They spoke openly, sometimes awkwardly, sometimes painfully, but always truthfully. Their connection had depth now, the kind that only emerges after heartbreak and reflection. And somewhere in that growth, Elena felt herself becoming ready. Ready not just for love, but for motherhood. Not because she could control the future, but because she had nurtured the person she would become first. The child she might one day hold in her arms would be entering a mother who had faced herself, embraced her mistakes, forgiven, and dared to love anyway. Small signs reminded her daily. A sunbeam across the kitchen floor. A soft creak in the stairs that sounded like the house breathing. A fleeting shadow of movement that reminded her that life always waited for those brave enough to act. She could almost imagine a tiny voice, gentle and warm, as if the future itself were reassuring her, "I am ready too." Elena planted flowers in the yard, watched them bloom in spring, and felt a sense of continuity she had never known. Life could be fragile, unpredictable, and sometimes painful, but it could also be abundant and beautiful if she chose to live fully. The house, once a silent witness to decay and neglect, now mirrored her transformation. The walls that had once hidden letters and secrets now held laughter, conversation, and music. The space of waiting had been replaced by the space of living. Elena sat on the porch one evening, the sun low and golden, and let herself breathe in the moment. She was not perfect. She was not free from doubt or fear. But she was whole in a way she had never been. And in that wholeness she felt something quiet, tender, and almost imperceptible, a promise. Not a certainty. Not a guarantee. But a whisper of what might come. A child she might hold, a love that might last, a life shaped by courage and choice rather than fear and regret. Elena smiled, letting the warmth of the evening wrap around her. The house, once a symbol of loss and the weight of the past, had become a place of hope. A place for the life she was finally ready to live. And she knew, deep in her heart, that she would meet the future as the mother she was meant to be. Elena sat in the quiet of the evening, the house bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun. Everything felt still, yet alive in a way that made her chest tighten, not with fear but with gratitude. She looked around at the home she had transformed, the room she had repaired, and the small personal touches she had added. The letters, the first, the second, and the countless journals hidden in walls and corners, were no longer just paper. They were part of her story, part of her growth. She realized now that love sometimes arrives before the person does. Before the child, before the reconciliation, before the perfect moment. Sometimes, love comes in whispers, in guidance, in the quiet courage to face yourself. Elena's fingers traced the edge of the folded letters one last time. She thought of her fears, her grief, the moments she had tried to hide from herself. She understood now that every tear, every heartbeat of doubt, had shaped her into the woman she was meant to become. She had been answering the letters long before she realized it, Not with words, but with actions, with forgiveness, with the willingness to embrace life fully. She closed her eyes and let herself breathe deeply. The ache of loss was still there, faint but manageable. The scars of her past remained, but they no longer defined her. She was whole, not because fate had guided her perfectly, but because she had chosen to face everything honestly, bravely, and with an open heart. Somewhere in the quiet, she imagined the future. A child she might hold, a family she might create, a love she might fully give and receive. She didn't need proof. She didn't need certainty. The knowing was enough. Elena smiled softly, tears brimming but not falling. She understood, finally, that the story she had been waiting for had already begun. Every step she had taken, the pain, the hope, the courage, was part of the answer. She had met her own heart, and in doing so, she had met the promise of what could be. The house, once full of silence and shadows, now felt like a living thing, breathing with her, supporting her, and waiting alongside her. Outside, the wind rustled gently through the trees, and Elena felt the quiet reassurance that she was exactly where she was meant to be. She folded the letters carefully, placing them in a small wooden box. Not to hide them, not to forget, but to honor them. They were a testament to love, to growth, and to the fragile, unstoppable power of hope. For the first time in years, Elena felt truly complete. And she knew that she had answered the letters, not with words but with her life. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with gold and soft pinks. Elena watched it, breathing in the moment, and smiled. She was ready. Ready to live, to love, and to embrace whatever came next. The story had begun. She was finally home. Elena sat on the porch as the late afternoon sun poured over the house, brushing the walls with gold and warming the wooden floor beneath her feet. The air was still, except for the gentle whisper of wind through the trees, and the distant hum of life in the small neighborhood beyond her yard. The house, once heavy with dust and shadows, now felt alive, almost breathing with her. Every corner, every repaired floorboard, every painted wall, held a story of struggle, fear, and small triumphs. She looked down at the small wooden box in her lap. The letters, the first one she had found hidden in the spare bedroom wall, the second one that had carried warnings, and the countless notes tucked in old journals, rested inside it. She ran her fingers over the smooth surface, feeling the weight not only of the paper but of the moments they had created in her life. These letters had arrived in the quietest way, yet they had pulled her through the loudest storm she had ever faced. A soft sigh escaped her lips. She thought about the first letter. How impossible it had seemed. How the idea that her future child could somehow reach her across time had made her heart race with disbelief and longing all at once. And yet, even knowing now that the letters had been carefully prepared, hidden, and placed by her aunt, designed to guide her and prepare her for the challenges she had yet to face, Elena understood that their effect had been no less miraculous. They had made her look at herself, truly look. At her loneliness, her fear, her regrets, the walls she had built around her heart, and the truths she had avoided because they were too painful to face. She remembered the nights she had lain awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling hollow, imagining the life she had once planned. The letters had brought those quiet memories to the surface, forcing her to confront them. And it was in that confrontation that she had begun to heal. Tears filled her eyes again, but this time, they were not only for sorrow. They were for the resilience she had found in herself. For the courage she had discovered in the moments when the letters had asked her to act, and she had chosen to listen. For the quiet strength of taking responsibility for her choices, even when it hurt. For finally forgiving herself. Elena lifted her gaze to the yard. The flowers she had planted were in bloom, vibrant and stubborn, rising from soil she had tended with patience and care. Each petal reminded her that life could continue, that growth was possible even after winters of neglect. She thought about how she had feared motherhood, feared love, feared hope itself. And now, sitting here, she realized that the most important readiness was not about having a child yet, or having everything in perfect order. It was about having the heart to meet what was coming, whatever it might be. She thought of Daniel and the conversations that had shaken her to the core. The words that hurt, the tears that fell, the moments she wanted to turn away from but didn't. The letters had forced her to face him, to face their shared history, and to speak honestly for the first time in years. She had learned that love was not safe. Love was not easy. But it was alive and it was worth the risk. Elena pressed her hand to the wooden box, letting the warmth of the afternoon sun spill over her fingers. Each letter was a reminder of the journey she had taken, not to discover secrets, but to discover herself. She realized that love sometimes comes before certainty. Sometimes it arrives in whispers, in guidance, in challenges that push you to the edge so you can learn to stand on your own 2 feet. Sometimes it comes not as a promise, but as an invitation to become whole. She thought of the child who may or may not exist yet, a future waiting for her courage to take shape. Her chest ached with longing, but the ache was different now. It was no longer raw and desperate. It was patient and tender. She had prepared herself. She had become someone who could give love fully, unafraid of its fragility. And that, she realized, was more important than certainty. Her eyes wandered across the house. Each repaired room, each touched corner, felt like a reflection of her own growth. The walls that once held secrets now held light, laughter, and music. The spare bedroom where the first letter had been hidden was no longer a place of fear or uncertainty. It had become a space of creation, possibility, and peace. The house was no longer a container for her grief, it was a witness to her courage. The wind shifted, carrying with it a faint scent of spring blooms from the garden. She closed her eyes and let herself breathe deeply. For the first time in years, she felt entirely present, entirely herself. She realized that the letters had been answered not with words, but with actions. The way she had faced the past, the way she had forgiven, the way she had chosen love over fear. She had been the answer all along. Elena opened the box and looked at the letters once more. She did not need to read them again. The guidance they had given her was now etched into her life, into her decisions, into the person she had become. She placed the letters back carefully, closing the lid, and set the box on a shelf where sunlight would fall across it in the morning. She did this not to hide them but to honor them. She stood and walked through the house, running her fingers along walls that had once been cracked, peeling, and lifeless. She smiled softly at the sound of the floorboards creaking beneath her feet, the soft echo of life moving through space she had healed along with herself. She paused at the window and watched the sun dip low, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, a gentle promise that life continued and she could too. Elena thought about the journey she had taken, from despair to hope, from fear to courage, from silence to honesty. She understood that the story of her life would always carry shadows, grief, and the memory of mistakes. But it would also carry light, love, and the knowledge that she had faced herself and grown stronger for it. Somewhere deep inside, a quiet part of her imagined the future. A child's laughter, a soft hand in hers, the warmth of a family built with care and intention. She did not need proof nor certainty. The imagining itself felt sacred. She could feel it in her bones. The child would arrive not as a certainty of fate, but as a continuation of the life she had courageously chosen to live. Elena took a final, slow breath and let the tension in her shoulders fall away. She smiled again, not at the past, not at the letters, not at what might come, but at herself. She had answered the letters. She had answered the quiet call to live fully, bravely, and openly. She had forgiven herself, faced her fear, and embraced the beauty of the present moment. The sun vanished behind the horizon, leaving the sky awash in soft twilight. The house, once full of silence, now held a quiet, steady hum, a life lived honestly without pretense or avoidance. Elena sat on the porch for a long while, watching the first stars appear. In the silence, she whispered to herself, "I am ready. Ready for love. Ready for life. Ready for the child she may hold in the future, and ready for every possibility that came before them." The letters had led her here.